So now let's look at a couple of activities, activity 2 and activity 3. It's a very good activities because it's kind of like an exam pattern. Now in your exams, you don't need to quote all the categories of threats, and you don't need to say which threat, what is this, etc. Like for example, they might not ask you questions like what type of threat is this, what kind of threat is this. They might not ask you, okay, what are the various types of threats, like they used to ask in AA. Like in AA you might get some direct questions, but in AAA you won't get that. You definitely won't get that in AAA. In AAA, they will give you short scenarios or short sentences as part of your scenario, and you need to identify what kind of threat it is, like what category of threat this falls under. Even in category, which type of threat is it? Personal relationship, business relationship, financial interest, financial matters, what kind of threat it will falls under. So it's very important that for the exam, you need to understand the concepts and apply them, because I told you, right, AAA is all about 65% application. So theory based is not what they are looking for, is about how strong you are in theory is not what they are looking for. They are looking for how strong you are able to apply the theory you have learned. So let's try to understand whatever we have learned so far, how do we apply them in an answer. So look at this. Discuss the ethical issues raised by the following scenarios and recommend the suitable responses that the auditor should be taken in each case. An audit partner has recently been asked by the finance director of the firm's long-standing client to be her son's godfather. So what is the situation here? So there is an audit partner, and the audit partner has been asked by the finance director of the firm's long-standing client. So audit partner has a client, and the client has a finance director. The finance directors have a son. The son's godfather is proposed to be the audit partner. So the finance director is proposing to the audit partner, can you be my son's godfather? Now you might think that what is this, right? But the threat that this particular situation possesses is a personal relationship. Like it's a firstly, if you look at here, there are a few red flags that is given. Okay. If you look at here, it's mentioned that it is long-standing client. So long-standing. So long-standing means familiarity comes in. Right? Familiarity threat comes in. Second, the finance director is asking the audit partner to become the finance director's son's godfather, which means there is a personal relationship that has been created. Now that could call for self-interest threat as well as familiarity. That would call for self-interest and familiarity. Now just imagine if the audit partner rejects this relationship, what will happen? The finance director will be completely opposed, right? Like he will get angry. Like, their personal relationship would get tarnished. So because of that, what could happen? There could be intimidation also. Now the audit partner is under pressure. Just because he is rejecting a godfather position of the finance director's son, he might lose a long-standing client. That is an intimidation threat. So the three threats that this particular question or this particular scenario possesses: self-interest, familiarity, and intimidation. So self-interest, familiarity, and intimidation are the three threats that this particular relationship will incur. So how does the response, so how do we need to respond to this threat? What are the action or responses that we need to take? So the responses is that the risk here is significant because both the engagement partner and finance director are senior positions who can exert significant influence. Like both of them have significant influence over their matters. Like finance director is responsible for the financial statement. Audit partner is responsible for audit of the financial statement. So they both are in a situation of exerting significant influence. So firstly, the firm should implement certain safeguards, right? What is the easiest safeguard they could implement is to rotation of the partner. So they could have rotated the partner and brought in a new partner to help the audit to be completed. And if the partner is rotated and now he's not the partner of this client anymore, then having this personal relationship might not be a big threat, will not be a severe threat. Then we have something called as EQR, Engagement Quality Review, also called as hot review. So this hot review can also be undertaken to ensure that there is no undue influence on this audit by the partner. So that could also be a safeguard that could be applied. So when we answer the situation, with the situation itself, you need to think, see, it's just one sentence in the situation, but with this, our answer is quite detailed, right? Our answer is quite detailed. So in this situation, what we can do is we can say, okay, self-interested, familiarity, intimidation are the threats. Are the threats that actually affects this particular client and the audit firm, and hence the audit partner has to appoint or has to apply these safeguards to ensure that the risk is very mitigated in order for him to continue. The next situation is that a partner of the firm who is qualified actuary wishes to provide valuation services to the firm's audit clients. So what kind of threat it is? So here in this case, what will happen is that the partner who is a qualified actuary wants to provide valuation services to the client. So it is the threat which falls under provision of non-assurance services. So when there is a provision of non-assurance services, what kind of threats the partner could face? So the partner could, the audit could face, firstly, there could be self-review. Okay, self-review. Because the actuary services will be provided by the partner, and based on the actuary services, the valuation of certain investments or employee benefit schemes, etc., could be created, and that amounts, we as auditors, the audit partner, we as auditors will be auditing it. So he is taking dual role. He's doing valuation services, and as well as he will be providing audit services. So degree of judgment will get impaired. Like, we will not actually find mistakes in his own work, or he will not call out mistakes in his own work. So that will call for a self-review threat. There could also be advocacy threat. Now, how an advocacy threat could come? Like, if you are providing certain valuation related services, you are like advocating for the client, like you are talking on behalf of the client. You might be, helping the client to build something, which is what a lawyer does, or which is what an advocate does. So that will also call for an advocacy threat. So how can they mitigate this? Like, what they should do to mitigate this particular threat? Firstly, we need to ensure that this is not a public interest entity. If it is a public interest entity, then providing these valuation services will be almost equal to like preparing certain amounts in the financial statement. And for the public interest entity, it is not allowed. So if the client is a PIE, then the services cannot be provided. Like, the valuation services cannot be provided, or they should resign from audit services. So either one of them they have to do. If it is not a PIE, if the client is not a PIE, then the services still it creates, whatever the services we provide will have certain kind of self-review or advocacy threat. But what we can do is we can have two separate teams. So we can have two separate teams providing the two services. And we need to ensure that any team member who's providing these valuation services should not work as an auditor for this client. So it has to be under two different partners, two different services, two different members who are doing the valuation services versus who are doing the audit services. That's how we can safeguard this threat. So now we would have understood or got a clarity of how we need to approach, right? So when a question is or a scenario is given, and situations like these are given, always think why the sentence is given, and is there any ethical constraint in this threat, in this situation? If yes, what category of threat they follow under? what kind of threat they are, and how can they mitigate it. So that's how we need to answer. And I always tell students that they need to answer with these three areas, like what, why, and how. What is the threat, why it is a threat, and how can we resolve it. That's how they need to answer it. So with that, we will look at the next activity, which is activity number 3, which is a bigger activity, and it has multiple paragraphs. So we will look that in detail.